welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling the clean energy transition, where it stands in 2025. And we're looking at a really interesting article from BloombergNEF. It's called 5 Energy Transition Lessons for 2025.
Okay.
Written by Albert Chung.
Right.
He's a real expert in this field. So I've been following his work for a while.
Yeah.
And I think you have too, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. He's really sharp, really knows his stuff.
Yeah, so you've probably seen the headlines, right?
Yeah.
Clean energy is booming. But are we doing enough to hit those net zero goals?
It feels like a constant back and forth, doesn't it? One day it's like, oh, we're making so much progress, and then the next it's like, oh my God, we're doomed. It's tough to really get a sense of where we are.
It does. It feels like this constant tug of war between hope and frustration.
Yeah, totally. I think Chung really captures that tension well in this piece. He sort of acknowledges, there's this real sense of progress, but there's also this sense of urgency. We've got to keep our foot on the gas.
Exactly. So let's dive into these his 5 key lessons that he kind of lays out. And his first point is actually surprisingly optimistic.
Right.
He's like, the transition IS moving forward, despite all the ups and downs, it's not losing steam.
I think what's really fascinating here is the data that he presents. So he's like, 2024, solar installations up 35% year on year. Wind installations grew by 5%. Energy storage installations, this is a big one, skyrocketed 76%.
That's huge.
Yeah. Even EV sales showed a healthy increase of 26%. I mean, these aren't small numbers. This is serious growth.
Yeah, and it's not just happening, in one region, right? This is a global phenomenon.
Yeah, totally. We're seeing this progress across the board, even in industries that are traditionally difficult to decarbonize. So, things like clean hydrogen, carbon capture, they're starting to gain traction. We're seeing real projects, real investments emerging. It's really exciting to see that.
Now, I know, some listeners might be wondering, we've had some recent changes in U.S. policy.
Right.
Will that, sort of shift away from, strong federal support for clean energy? Will that slow things down? So is that, cause for concern?
I think that's a really valid question. And actually, Chung addresses that head on in the article. He basically says that while, a less favorable policy environment in the U.S. might lead to a slightly slower pace of growth, he doesn't think it's going to derail the transition completely.
Yeah.
The momentum behind clean energy is it's becoming increasingly independent of any single government's actions. You got market forces, technological advancements, and just global commitments. They're all playing a crucial role. So, I think the takeaway from lesson 1 is really clear. The clean energy train has left the station. It's not turning back.
It's full steam ahead.
Yeah. But Chung's second lesson, this is where he introduces a dose of realism, right?
Right.
He argues that, while the transition is underway, the next phase is going to be trickier. We've picked the low-hanging fruit.
Easy stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The early adopters, those with the resources and the motivation, they've already made the switch. And so now we're entering a phase where, engaging a broader segment of the population is key.
It's like learning a new language.
Uh-huh.
You see that rapid progress in the beginning,
right?
But then it takes consistent effort to reach fluency.
Precisely. I mean, we're moving from this period of exponential growth to a period of more linear progress. And so, you can see that, for example, with electric vehicle sales. They're still increasing, but that rate of growth is slowing compared to, the explosive growth that we saw a few years ago.
Right.
And this doesn't mean we're failing, but it does mean we need to adapt our approach.
Okay. And that leads us to Chung's third lesson, which is all about, avoiding knee-jerk reactions to headlines.
Oh, yeah.
And actually digging deeper into the data.
Yeah, absolutely.
He uses the example of the so-called EV slowdown that made, a lot of headlines in Europe in 2024.
Yeah, I remember that. A lot of doom and gloom.
It was all over the news.
Yeah.
So, but if you only read the headlines, right?
Uh-huh.
You might have thought that consumers were suddenly turning against electric cars.
Right. Like the EV revolution is over.
Yeah.
Pack it up, everybody.
But the reality was much more nuanced, wasn't it?
Oh, way more nuanced, way more. So Chung highlights Germany as a good example.
Oh, okay.
And their EV sales did dip in the summer of 2024, but this was actually a correction from this like artificial surge in sales the previous year.
Okay.
And that was driven by the fact that a government subsidy program was about to expire. So everybody rushed to buy EVs before the subsidies ended. And so, then the following year's figures look weak in comparison,
Yeah.
even though, they were still very significant. It's just that, the previous year had been artificially inflated.
Right. So it's a reminder that year-on-year comparisons can be misleading without understanding the context.
Oh, yeah, big time. And here's where I think it gets really interesting. Chung points out that even though EV sales growth might have slowed in some regions, automakers were still meeting their CO2 emissions targets.
Wow. So,
Like they were selling enough EVs to comply with the regulations.
yeah. So it wasn't like that demand was drying up. It was more like maybe,
Well, so in fact, he argues that the EU's policy structure might have even incentivized automakers to strategically hold back on releasing their newest EV models
okay.
until like these stricter emissions targets kicked in. So instead of a slowdown, it was more like a calculated strategy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you realize that.
That's fascinating. So, I mean, it's a great example, I think, of how important it is to be critical consumers of information,
Totally.
especially when it comes to, anything related to the energy transition. Like, there's often more to this story
Way more.
than meets the eye. Right?
It's so easy to get caught up in the headlines, and and then you end up with this very sort of skewed perspective on what's actually happening.
Yeah, and this really underscores the need for, informed decision making.
For sure.
Not just for policymakers, but for all of us, right? Like we have to be more discerning about the information that we're consuming. Which brings us to Chung's fourth lesson, and this is where I think he really gets to the heart of how this transition will unfold in the real world.
Okay.
He makes this point. He's like, look, a successful energy transition has to be a profitable one.
Right. It can't just be about idealism or good intentions.
Exactly.
We need private companies. We need investors.
Yeah.
We need them to see clean energy as a viable, attractive investment opportunity. I mean, there simply isn't enough public or philanthropic capital out there to fund this transition on its own.
That makes sense. But we have seen, like, some cases where clean energy projects have struggled to compete, with their fossil fuel counterparts. So how do we ensure that clean energy investments will generate good returns? Like, is it a matter of, like, just making sure that the costs are competitive, or is there something else going on there?
Well, Chon actually highlights two contrasting examples in his article.
Okay.
He points to the rising costs of clean hydrogen,
Okay.
which make it harder to compete with gray hydrogen, which is the hydrogen that's produced from fossil fuels. And in this case, he argues that, governments need to step in. They need to provide incentives and policies to kind of level the playing field.
Okay. So things like carbon pricing or subsidies to make clean hydrogen more competitive.
Exactly. But then he contrasts that with the offshore wind industry.
Okay.
And here, the challenge isn't a lack of investment, but rather an overabundance of competition.
Oh. Yeah.
So, governments, they're eager to secure the cheapest clean power, right?
Sure.
And so they've implemented these very competitive auction processes for offshore wind projects. And so this has led to developers bidding very aggressively, often squeezing their profit margins just to win the contracts. And so we've seen, projects canceled or delayed because the economics simply don't work. They can't make a profit at the prices that they've bid.
So it's kind of like a balancing act, right? Like, we want to encourage competition.
For sure.
But we also need to make sure that these clean energy projects are financially viable in the long run.
Precisely. And this is where I think Ching's lesson really resonates with everybody, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're an investor, a consumer, or just an engaged citizen, understanding these economic realities it's just crucial.
It is.
For making informed decisions about where to put your money, what policies to support, and really just like how to contribute to a successful transition.
Okay, so deep divers, that is a lot to take in, for sure. But we've covered the first four of Chung's 5 energy transition lessons. And we've established the clean energy train is moving full steam ahead. But the path is getting a bit more complex. So we need to be strategic, critical thinkers, and aware of the economic realities at play, But before we dive into that final, and this is a thought-provoking one, a lesson about global competition, we need to take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We are continuing our deep dives into Albert Chung's 5 energy transition lessons from his article.
Yes, we are. And I feel like we've already kind of established, the fact that this transition is progressing.
Yeah.
But we're starting to kind of see some of those emerging challenges.
Totally. And the fact that the road ahead is maybe a little bit more complex than we thought,
Yeah, definitely.
We need to think a little more strategically, critically analyze the information that we're seeing and really start to understand those economic forces at play.
Exactly. So with that, let's dive into Chung's 5th and final lesson.
Yeah.
This one, I have to say, this one really caught my attention.
Yeah.
Because he delves into how global competition is actually shaping the future of clean energy.
Right.
Like, it's not just about reducing emissions anymore.
Yeah.
It's like who comes out on top in this new green world order, right?
Yeah. The stakes are higher, right? So, he traces the evolution of the global conversation around climate action. Initially, it was all about shared sacrifice.
Yeah.
Countries reluctantly agreeing to cut emissions. And then, you fast forward to the 2010s.
Yeah.
It shifted to this more optimistic narrative of opportunity and leadership. Like, remember all that talk about how investing in clean energy was going to create jobs and boost economies and establish this global leadership?
Oh, yeah. Going green was like the path to economic prosperity.
Exactly. Yeah. But what Chung observes now is this shift away from that idealism toward a more hard-nosed focus on economic competition. So countries are becoming increasingly strategic about how they approach the clean energy transition. It's not just about saving the planet together anymore. It's about gaining a competitive advantage.
Right. So it's less about, we're all in this together and more about every country for itself.
In a way, yeah. I mean, countries are focused on securing access to those critical resources, developing cutting-edge technologies, and building up domestic industries that can really compete on a global scale. And this creates both opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, what kind of challenges?
Well, so take the steel industry, for example.
Right.
Many countries still rely heavily on traditional coal-based steel production. But, as the world transitions toward cleaner technologies like hydrogen-based steel making, the countries that can or won't adapt, they risk falling behind. It's pretty serious.
It sounds like a classic case of adapt or die.
Yeah, maybe a little dramatic, but you get the idea. And Chung points out that China, with its massive investments in clean tech manufacturing, is already ahead of the game in many areas.
Right.
So we're seeing this global oversupply of solar panels, batteries, other clean technologies, and this is largely driven by Chinese manufacturing.
Oh.
And this drives down prices, which is great for consumers, but it also puts a lot of pressure on manufacturers in other countries.
Yeah, it seems like a double-edged sword. Cheaper clean tech is great for, accelerating the transition, but it also creates this fiercely competitive landscape.
Oh, yeah.
That can be really tough for companies and countries trying to catch up.
Absolutely. And this is where trade policies and protectionism come into play, right? We're seeing more and more countries enacting, tariffs or other measures to protect their domestic industries from this wave of cheaper imports, particularly from China.
Right, like those tariffs on solar panels that we've seen in the U.S. and in other places. The intention is to give domestic manufacturers a boost.
Right.
But it often ends up, raising costs for consumers.
Yeah.
And potentially slowing down the overall adoption of clean energy.
That's the dilemma, is like, how do you find that right balance, right?
Yeah.
And Chung acknowledges that some level of protectionism might be unavoidable. But, he also suggests exploring more collaborative approaches.
Oh, okay.
So things like, joint ventures, knowledge-sharing agreements, intellectual property licensing arrangements.
So?
These strategies could allow countries to benefit from the expertise of those leading companies without having to build everything from scratch.
So it's about striking a balance between protecting national interests.
Yeah.
And fostering global cooperation.
Exactly. I mean, shutting out foreign companies entirely could stifle innovation.
Yeah.
And make the transition more difficult and expensive in the long run.
Right. So, I mean, Chung's point about global competition just adds this whole new layer of complexity to this issue. It's not just about clean versus dirty energy anymore. It's
Yeah.
it's about navigating these like intricate geopolitical and economic forces
Mhm.
in a way that balances national interests with the urgent need for global action.
It's a challenging landscape, but it's also, it's also fascinating.
It is, yeah.
The choices that, policymakers make in this arena are going to have a huge impact on how the energy transition unfolds in the years to come. And this isn't just something that's happening out there in the world of politics and economics.
Right.
This affects all of us.
From the cars that we drive to the products that we buy to the investments that we make. Clean energy is becoming increasingly central to our lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the choices that we make, both individually and collectively, will determine the shape of this transition and the kind of future that we create.
It sounds like we need to stay informed, engaged, and ready to adapt.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring those 5 lessons from Albert Chung about the clean energy transition in 2025. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. We've gone from kind of celebrating that remarkable progress in clean energy deployment to, acknowledging some of those emerging challenges, right?
Right.
And just that complex geopolitical landscape that's really starting to shape this transition.
Yeah, yeah. And it's fascinating how it's not just a straightforward path. So why don't we take a minute to just kind of recap those 5 key lessons that we've touched on. So the first thing we learned is that, the transition is happening.
Yeah, it's not even a question of if anymore, it's how.
Right, exactly. And we're seeing significant growth across the board.
Oh, yeah. Solar, wind, energy storage, electric vehicles. I mean, this is happening worldwide.
It is. It is. But then we hit lesson 2, which was, kind of a reality check.
Yeah, a bit of a dose of realism, right? We've picked the low-hanging fruit, those easy gains. They're kind of behind us.
Right.
And now we need to engage, a much broader segment of the population
Yeah.
and find ways to decarbonize those harder to abate sectors.
Right. Like this next phase requires, I think, a different approach, a little bit more strategic, maybe a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, definitely more complex.
Yeah. And then lesson 3 reminded us to be a little bit skeptical of those headlines, like really dig deeper into the data.
I'll just take things at face value.
Right, because we saw how easily those narratives can get skewed, like that whole EV slowdown story in Europe.
Right.
It turned out it was more about strategic timing by the automakers than a real genuine decline in demand.
Yeah, exactly.
And then lesson 4 brought in those economic realities of this transition. Like we can't just rely on idealism. We need to make clean energy a profitable endeavor. And Chung highlighted, the need for government intervention in some cases, like with clean hydrogen.
Yeah.
But also, cautioned against excessive competition, which can really squeeze those profit margins.
Yeah, and make projects unsustainable.
Exactly, which we've seen with offshore wind.
Right, right.
And then we arrived at that final kind of mind-blowing lesson, the rise of geoeconomic competition as like a driving force in this whole clean energy landscape. It's not just about saving the planet anymore. It's about who gains the economic and technological edge in this new green world order.
Yeah. You see countries, vying for control of critical resources, investing heavily in clean tech innovation and implementing trade policies to protect their domestic industries. It's this really complex and evolving landscape where collaboration and competition are really intertwined.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So what does all of this mean for you, our listener? Like why should you care about these 5 lessons?
Well, I think for starters, it highlights the fact that the energy transition isn't some abstract concept happening out there,
Right.
It's impacting all of us right here, right now.
It is.
And the choices that we make, as consumers, as investors, as citizens, they have a real impact on how this transition unfolds.
So it's kind of a call to action, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. We need to be informed, we need to be engaged, and we need to be willing to adapt.
Absolutely. The future of clean energy is still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping that future, whether it's, supporting businesses that are committed to sustainability, advocating for policies that accelerate the transition, or just making more conscious decisions about how we consume energy and invest our money. These are all things that we can do.
Yeah, and it's about recognizing that we're all part of this story, you know? The choices we make today are going to determine the kind of world that we leave for future generations.
That's a great point.
Uh,
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the complexities, the challenges, and the incredible opportunities that lie ahead. And we hope this has given you a deeper understanding of those forces that are really shaping the clean energy landscape in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're enjoying these deep dives, we encourage you to like this episode, subscribe to our channel for more, for more explorations of these really important topics.
Yeah, we'd love to have you along for the ride. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.